Hey guys, this is Gamaka. Welcome to another Pokemon trading card game discussion slash history video. This time on to Platinum, the age where basic Pokemon start to reign once again. We are at that point where Pokemon SP start coming in here, and these guys are absolutely nuts. We'll get into the properties of those as we go. Just want to quickly say sorry for not doing a whole lot with this in the last couple of weeks. We have had a friend's dog to take care of. Absolutely wonderful little animal, but exceptionally lively and relatively high maintenance. So most of my afternoons were taken up with stuff that way, and yeah, I haven't even been able to do a ton of streams in the last couple of weeks, but we're done with that now, so we can get into actually going back over the stuff here. And yeah, there's a lot to go over. We have Pop Series 9, a couple of promos as well down here, which one of them is actually pretty cool, just haven't been able to build a good deck with it myself. And yeah, a whole set of really funky stuff to go over. So let's just go over the Pokemon SP mechanic whilst we're here. These are fully evolved Pokemon. They are owners Pokemon effectively. Most of them are just Team Galactic's Pokemon in this set, but the SP mechanic will extend to Gym Leaders, Elite Four, Cynthia gets stuff as well in the upcoming sets, and they are basics despite their evolution status normally. They all have a 2x weakness instead of their standard plus 20 or whatever for this era, and they typically have rather overpriced attacks, but they're made up for by just being very efficient, right? Like Weavile, in terms of being a basic instead of being a stage 1, this sort of attack is a lot more effective. The Dialga and Palkia from this set, especially the level X's, have got some pretty crazy hits in here, and they still have a ton of HP as well, so they're relatively tanky. And being an archetype per se, they do actually have name support here as well, which is going to mitigate energy costs, actually negate powers and stuff as well, and they have their own inbuilt Super Scoop Up, which is crazy. So yeah, lots of cool stuff with it there. Let's just quickly go over the Pop Series stuff and the promos here before I go into the main set proper, because there really isn't a lot to go over. There's a Garchomp in here that's kind of fun, but we don't have double colorless yet, so there's no way this would actually work out yet. But it could technically work when we do get DCE. Free energy for 100, discard 2 energy on it, and spread 10 to all the opponent's bench is a pretty strong attack, to be honest. You just need a way of actually using it, which we don't have the multi-energy stuff right now, so it's not quite as efficient. And Dragon Rage, of course, is not very good unless you are extremely lucky. So we can't really count this one in just now, it's just strictly worse than the other Garchomp, but it's cool. You know, that's a thing. There's a lot of the Pokemon in here actually get abilities on their attacks based on what other named Pokemon you have in play. Like the Buizel over here, if you've got Pachirisu, you can have an agility effect on super fast. There's the Pikachu that does like auto paralysis if it evolved from Pichu. That's not exactly the same thing, but like Turtwig over here, 40 for free energy plus 20 and burn if you've got a Chimchar in play. These are never gonna actually be usable, let's be honest. They are all pretty awful. Even the Pachirisu's maybe the best one. It's like if you've got Krogunk, it's 40 plus poison, but you want to have Toxicroak, you don't want to have Krogunk. So yeah, really not good. What is potentially playable though, solely because of the types that it can go into, is this Rotom over here. It's a lightning type, but you can shift it to a psychic type if you need to hit weakness or bypass resistance for a 10, and for a psychic colorless, so it doesn't fit into lightning decks, which is reasonable to be honest. 30 damage, look at the opponent's hand, 10 for each trainer supporter stadium card they have in hand. This is just a weaker version of the Gengar from the previous set, but it's also on a basic, and it can be a different type, which is really cool. One of the best cards in this set is Lightning Weak, so if you can stick them on free trainers in hand, you can one-shot it, which is pretty solid. The other two promos we have here, we finally have the Porygon Z, which is really cool. As often as you like during your turn, you can move technical machines around your Pokemon in any way that you like. So this works with the Evoluta and Devoluta TMs from was it last set or the set before? One of the earlier sets in this block where you can use stuff like to evolve or devolve based on what you have out for no energy too, which is pretty cool. But you actually use them on the Porygon Z here for its damage output. For 2 colorless energy, you do 40 plus 20 for every technical machine attached to the Porygon. So you build them up around your board, you can put them wherever you want, and then when you want to do damage, you just move them over to the Porygon that you're attacking with, and it's really, really cool. One of the problems is that it's 2 energy, I suppose. 1 energy attacks are really what we're after for the sort of stage 2s at this point. But, you know, it's got a really cool Porygon Z that goes with it, where you can look at the top 2, like the level X, you can look at the top 2 cards, or like get the top 2 cards of your deck stacked, which is really neat. And its own 0 energy attack lets you evolve or level up into a level X for one of your Pokemon, which is cool. There's also a Gliscor over here which lets you replace it in replace the one that we banned for the Gliscor level X deck. It's not nearly as strong, but there are a couple of like auto poison effects. Gliscor level X itself can do so, and there's a Skuntank in this set we'll go over that you can do auto poison stuff with that synergizes with Bind Eye, where the opponent can't remove special conditions by evolving, devolving, or leveling up their Pokemon. And the poison is mentioned specifically because Cutting Turn is an interesting style of attack here, where it's life drain. You flip a coin, and if heads, you put your opponent 10 HP away from dying. And if you do that, you shuffle Gliscor and all cards attached to it back into the deck. So it sort of recurs itself. You need ways of searching it out again. So I'm not really sure exactly how this deck would get built, but it's neat. It's got 90 HP, it's got no retreat, so there's a nice little bit of it there, and you can still use it with the Gliscor level X. Night Slash is still pretty strong, and its other attack is 20 plus auto burn, which is not amazing to be honest, but is still fine. You know, it's 20 damage, potentially 40 for the effect on it, and the opponent can't remove that by leveling up or evolving, so it's cool. I don't think we're actually going to see it, but a Gliscor hit and run style deck could actually be playable this round, mostly because with all of these guys being such low energy attackers, Mr. Mime is a potential hit and run blocker that we could go into. Going into the Pokemon down the bottom here, I suppose, the level X's from this set, we'll just mention the Drapion first because I've bought the Drapion from the previous set out. Are you saying it's previous set? Yeah, Stormfront here. So this is the Drapion that you would level up from. Scorpion Grapple's pretty cool. No energy, 10 plus paralysis on heads, no retreat on tails, so you can lock the opponent in is kind of nice. And the Drapion level X synergizes a little bit with this because if you can flip heads on Tri-Poison, you make it so that the opponent is triple poisoned, and that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, this has an anti-synergy with Cross Poison, but that's fine, you can work around that. Sniping Tail, if you could somehow build up to it, is a really strong attack. 40 for 2 dark and 2 colorless is not very strong, but it also snipes 40 to the opponent's bench and prevents the active from retreating next turn. So yeah, pretty disruptive attack, all things considered. Giratina is a card that has a bunch of different copies in this set. The one card I didn't bring back out was the Shadow Force one, I believe it is, from like Legends Awakened, where I think it's Psychic Colorless. It does 20 to one of the opponent's bench and then flips for an agility cost, which is okay. I forget what else it did. Was it Brutal Edge, maybe? Or is that on one of these ones? I think it was that one, where it's like 2 Psychic and 2 Colorless to do 50 plus 10 for every damage counter on the opponent's active. Not a particularly strong card. Giratina level X is interesting. Wasn't really teched into anything. I don't expect it to be teched into anything here, but I guess it kind of could be. If the opponent tries to attack, then they have to discard a card from their hand in order to do so, which is cute, to say the least. And Darkness Lost actually introduces a new mechanic here as well. 2 Psychic, 2 Colorless, spread 30 to all of the opponent's Pokemon. Expensive, but pretty solid. However, if anything dies to this, they go to the Lost Zone instead of discarding it. The Lost Zone is like the equivalent of Yu-Gi-Oh's Banish Pile, except it's banishing, the equivalent would be banishing face down, because those cards are effectively uninteractable for the rest of the game. If you Lost Zone something, it never comes back. I don't think there has ever been a single card printed to this day, actually, and Lost Zone support was just in Lost Origin, to this day, I don't think there's been a single card which has been able to get anything out of the Lost Zone once it goes there. So it is a permanent discard, which is kind of cool, I suppose. The actual Giratinas in this set, Let Loose is probably the best one. You may see this teched into some decks, especially if they're playing the Moonlight Stadium. Once during your turn when you bench this thing, both players will shuffle their hand into the deck and draw up to 4 cards. And then Earth Power is kind of cool. You know, 60 for 2 Psychic and a Colorless, a little bit expensive, but still pretty solid for a basic Pokemon. But it gets a little better because you flip 2 coins, and for every head you get, you do 10 to each of the opponent's bench Pokemon. That's kind of rad. Yeah, strong attack, very strong ability is really what you use this for. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe you'll see one of it. Its 3 energy retreat cost is going to make it very hard to play though. Like Marshadow Let Loose was played because it has 1 retreat and was just generally not hard to like play around. 3 energy retreat in a format that doesn't have easy ways of getting it outside of a stadium card? I don't know, that might be a bit tough. The Giratina Origin over here, this one is probably the best overall Giratina. Overslash does 10 to each of the opponent's Pokemon for 2 colorless. That's a bit expensive, but it's on a basic, so you kind of expect it. For 2 Psychic instead, Darkwing Flaps does 20 and shuffles one of the opponent's cards in their hand at random into the deck. You do get to look at it before you shuffle it back, but yeah, sure. And then rack down Psychic Double Colorless to do 60. Okay. Like, it's fine. You could probably build a deck around this. The Dark Weakness is unfortunate for this set, though, so you maybe don't, but that's just Giratina in general. Then we have 2 other ones down here. Hit and run style for this one. If you have a Psychic and a Colorless, you do 20 and switch Giratina if you choose to, and 1 Psychic, 2 Colorless to do 50, and if the opponent gets KO'd by this, then they get Lost Zoned as well. All cards attached to it as well, so if you can get rid of a lot of energy cards, maybe this would be good. This could potentially work against stuff like Gyarados or Krickettoons as well, things that specifically need name stuff in play, but I don't know about that. The last Giratina is the one that's got the highest HP and the lowest retreat cost, so you could argue this would be playable, but its attacks are really bad. It's also a plus for its weakness instead of a ×2. So that's kind of cool, I suppose. Dragon Claw is 30 for 2 colorless though, which is not amazing, and Dragon Breath, 2 Psychic and a colorless to do 80, which is good, but it doesn't do anything if you flip tails. If you do flip heads, it paralyzes though, so that's neat, but yeah, like 3 energy, tails do nothing? No, thank you. I would rather pass. So that's the Giratina package in general. I don't think anyone's even going to try it, to be honest. It doesn't seem particularly powerful, but it is what it is. The other big guy from this is, or the other big winner, is Shaman. Shaman makes its introduction in Platinum in general, and it has 3 main cards and 2 level X's for the land and the sky forms. So probably the best overall one is the 70 HP hollow one over here. It has a water resistance, which is kind of nice. The Skyman form has the fighting resistance instead, so you get to pick and choose whichever thing you want that way. 1 grass energy to do 10 damage and heal 2 from Shaman and put the opponent to sleep. So that's why I think this is kind of good in general. If you have been picked on early game, you can recover the pressure quite nicely, and 10 plus auto sleep is not a bad payoff anyway, just for going first. Damage aid, doing 30 for 2 grass colorless here is passable enough, but if the opponent's affected by a special condition, you do 80 and then remove the special conditions from the opponent. That's actually kind of strong. There's a Darkrai that when you bench it also sleeps the opponent, and the Skuntank in this set will also poison, although it does poison your active as well, so you would have to be careful of that. But yeah, 80 for 2 is like amazing, so there is a way that you could build with this. The Skyman form, for no energy, attaches a grass from your hand to itself. Fine, I suppose. And then Air Slash for 2 colorless does 40, and if tails, you discard an energy attached to it. Notably, this does have 80 HP, which is cool, but I still think the land one is better. There's a second landmin though, which maybe this is the one that ends up seeing the most play because it's got 80 HP and, you know, has water resistance, which is actually really good in a Gyarados format. No energy, 10 plus 10 for each energy that's on the Shaman, so yeah, you do get benefits if you attach energy. That's kind of cool. And then Aromatherapy, I think, is actually really strong if you plan to attack with Shaman as a level X as well. 40 damage for Grass Double Colorless is not a lot, but you heal 2 from all of your Pokemon. So it's like that Torterra's Leaf Storm, but on a basic, which is cool, to be honest. Good against spread decks for sure. The level X's, the Landmin level X, it gives your Grass Pokemon that aren't Shaman 40 extra HP. You can only do one of these, so you can't do like a 2-2 Shaman and have 80 extra HP. That would be broken. Only 100 max HP on this guy, but it's a basic level X, you kind of expect that. Seed Flare is very interesting though. Grass Double Colorless to do 40, you choose as many grass energy from your hand as you like and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like, and you do 20 extra damage for every grass energy you attached in that way. So very interesting energy acceleration method, and bonus damage as well. I think the damage output is honestly not that strong on this thing though, because it's very rare that you're going to get a chance to actually do Seed Flare in the first place. It feels like, as much as I'm iffy on this term half the time, feels exceptionally win more. But Thankfulness is a really good Pokebody, and I would play it just for that alone. The Skyman form of this has 110 HP and no retreat cost is quite notable here. You could probably build a deck around this thing. If any of your grass Pokemon were KO'd by damage from the opponent's attack last turn, this Shaman, all of its attacks will do 60 more damage to the active. So it's not just Energy Flare, it's also potentially the base form as well. So if you go from the Landmin over here and inflict a status condition on the opponent, you would actually do 140 damage to them, which is absurd. So yeah, that's cool. Its own attack is 50 for Grass Colorless, so pretty efficient, reasonable enough damage output for that, and you get to move your energy cards around your board in any way that you like, which is very fun, to be honest. This is not the only time we're going to see this off of a Skyman actually, but it's going to be significantly better later on. But I don't know, if you're playing a dedicated grass deck, this is very cool at the very least. Is it playable? I don't know. I've been told it's not in the main Discord stuff by, you know, people who played at the time, but I think it's neat. Maybe you could do something with it. Who knows? Moving on to the set proper then, because we do have a Dialga and a Palkia to go over, but we'll go over those as we go over the base forms, because the base forms are also incredibly important here. We finally get the damage bind on for us. So any Pokemon that has a damage counter on it in play can't use Pokepowers. So if you can do a spread attack, or even do something like Bronzong, which puts damage counters on the opponent's stuff that has Pokepowers on them, suddenly they can't use them anymore. This doesn't affect things that come into play, which is a bit of a problem, and it affects you as well. So if the opponent puts a damage counter on your guy, your Claydol, which is going to be exceptionally easy to do, you kind of get screwed, so it's unfortunate. Its attacks are, I don't know, I can't even claim they're particularly good. Gigavolt for Lightning Colorless does 30, if you flip heads it's 60 instead, but if you flip tails it's 30 plus paralysis. Fine, you're never going to flip the one that you want at the right time. Reflect Energy is 70 for Lightning Double Colorless, and you move an energy from the on-forest to one of your bench Pokemon. Okay, you know, it's not amazing, to be honest with you. Blastoise, I didn't actually try this deck out yet, but it is a very fun looking ability here. Once during your turn before you attack, you would look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Any water energy that you find there, you attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like, if you want, and you discard the any other cards that you find. You can discard the energy too if you want, but I don't know why you would most of the time. Aqua Press is pretty cool for a water colorless. It's 20 plus 10 for every water energy attached to all Pokemon in play. So if the opponent's using a bunch of rainbow based energy, or if they're just on a water deck like Palkia, you can do some pretty big damage with that. And Double Launcher is pretty strong with Dig Well, actually. 2 water, 2 colorless, discard 2 water, snipe 60 on 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon. You can't use this attack in consecutive turns, but snipe 60 twice is really strong, so it's kind of cool. Blaziken is a little bit better than last time at the very least. You can auto burn one of the opponent's active. Remember, this is still when double battles were possible, so just treat it as auto burn for our purposes, which is cool. 40 for 2 colorless and the opponent can't retreat next turn is neat. And Fire Spin for double fire and a colorless does 100, discard 2 energy on the Blaziken. Quite good synergy with the Heatran level X, because you burn as well as doing like Fire Spin and getting the energy back, so it's effectively 130 damage every turn. No, it's 120 because it's the Magmortar level X that does the bonus damage. Yeah, but it's a guaranteed 120 if you can get the energy down. I think Infernape probably does it better overall because it can use less energy to attack, but this also has more HP, and Clutch is potentially good as well, so it's neat. Problem is it's fire, which is like really bad at the moment. Delcatty pairs with the Blastoise that we just saw. Once during turn before you attack, search your discard pile for 2 basic energy, top deck them, and put 2 damage counters on Delcatty. So then you use the Blastoise to get a guaranteed 2 energy minimum, which is really good because you're discarding 2 energy for your main attacks, whether it's Kyogre or Blastoise, so that's kind of cool. The attacks really don't matter here, so we're not really going to go over them. You can technically heal with the first attack, but if you have Delcatty in the active, you're probably dead anyway. This Dialga is really solid. Once during your turn when you bench it, you can search your discard pile for up to 3 Pokemon or basic energy cards in any combination, apart from level X's, and top deck them in any order that you want, which is cool. So yeah, very solid little one-off card that you could tech into stuff here. A one-off Pokepower like this may be a little bit vulnerable in this set though, as we'll go over, but still, really good card nonetheless. This Dialga could potentially be neat as well. Time Aura prevents the opponent from evolving their actives so long as this Dialga is active. And then for 2 metal and 2 colorless, it does 100 and discards all metal. So I don't think you're using the attack, and that's where this card kind of falls apart. I don't think the Dialga level X is good enough to make this C play either, but it's at least cool in theory. There may be something you could do this. Maybe in Magnezone you could potentially use this, because you've got Lightning and probably Coal Energy in there as well. So that's kind of fun. Probably not good enough though. Let's talk about one of the best cards of this set though. Dialga G level X, and the regular and the level X are both amazing here. 1 metal, 1 colorless to do just 10 damage obviously isn't particularly strong. Energy gain is going to take that colorless away from it though, and the opponent can't play trainers or stadium cards next turn. Yep, it is the Manectric type lock again, so yeah, item lock is back in a very menacing way, to be honest. I'd be surprised if Matt doesn't play this. Second Strike is also relatively good though. If the opponent's got 2 or more damage counters on them already, it's 70 instead of 50, and that is for metal double colorless. Basically metal colorless when all things are said and done. Yeah, that's just solid numbers, and it's dead easy to get those 2 counters on this set as well, as we will go over in the future. Dialga G level X is absurd, to be honest. 120 HP on this guy. I mean, the basic one already had 100, so yeah, really high end there. And its Pokebody prevents non-SP Pokemon from using Pokebodies. We haven't really had any way of blocking bodies for a while, and this is as good as it gets, to be honest. This stops Mewtwo level X from destroying SP decks, because if you get this out against a Mewtwo's body that makes it immune to non-evolved Pokemon gets shut off, and then you can go from there. It's really good. Remove Lost is also really strong as far as attacks go when you build this up properly. 2 metal, 2 colorless, again strip one of those colorless away with energy gain. Flip until Tails for each head to remove an energy and Lost Zone it from the defending Pokemon. You also just do 80 damage. Even if you're KOing the flip might actually matter because you get to Lost Zone energy instead of discarding them, but yeah, it's like, even if you don't kill, you might just strip them of the energy that they need. Absurd card. There is another regular Dialga in here as well, but it's kind of awful, to be honest, so we don't really care about that one. God of War? Maybe. We did ban the other one, and I haven't asked to unban it because I don't really want to play Guardi at this point. I don't think it's that strong. As often as you like though, Psychic Connect lets you move a Psychic Energy from one of your bench to your active, so I guess that's kind of cool. Its attacks are pretty bad though, like Energy Burst is just not that strong nowadays, and Psychic Protection, yeah, no weakness next turn, but whatever, it's not that strong. You just play the other one, so meh. Manectric is really strong. Electric Barrier protects your bench Pokemon that aren't Manectric from any damage done by attacks, not just the opponents, your own as well. This is important for the Terry attack here. Power Wave. 1 lightning, 30 damage to each Pokemon in play that has a Pokepower. So normally this would hit your Uxies, your Claydolls and stuff on the bench, but it doesn't because Manectric's body prevents that from happening. Attract Current is also pretty solid, 2 colors to do 40, search your deck for a lightning energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon, that's pretty good. 90 HP, no retreat cost, nice anti-meta card in a lot of situations, because, you know, powers are pretty prevalent after all, so yeah, I like it. Palkia, if Dialga is the best card of the set, and it's even debatable, this is definitely the second best. I think Palkia is probably going to be more likely to see it play here though. 100 HP Water type, yeah, Water's pretty solid at the moment. Lightning types are just not very powerful in this format, and this one also dodges the main hits from stuff like Manectric and whatnot, so yeah, solid typing already. Splashing Turn for Water Colorless is 20 plus a potential switch. Again, energy gain makes that a 1 energy attack, which is good. And then Pearl Breath is really solid. Water double colors to do 50 and 10 to each of the opponent's bench. Once again, energy gain is going to make that a 2 energy attack, which is super powerful. But it gets so much better because Palkia G level X is cracked as hell. It's 120 HP still. Lost Cyclone is an insane Pokepower to have. Any player who has 4 or more bench Pokemon chooses 3 of their bench to keep, and any other bench Pokemon that they don't choose and all cards attached to them go to the Lost Zone. So this immediately forms the lock aspect with Mesprit from Legends Awakened, which is prevents the opponent from playing any Pokepowers during their next turn. And you can just fill your bench up with these things, and Lost Cyclone will free up your spaces, whilst also, just like in a way, just like Dusknoir did, it prevents the opponent from overbenching as well, which is really, really good. But Hydro Shot shouldn't be underestimated either. 2 water and 2 colorless is a lot to ask for, but again, energy gain strips 1 of those away. Discard 2 energy, snipe 80 on one of the opponent's Pokemon. You can do this in consecutive turns too if you can build the energy up, so ridiculously strong attack. To go alongside the spread damage that you're already doing up here, this is just wow. Yeah, lots and lots of power. Rampardos is really, really strong, except it's a fossil, so it's hard to get out. I was having a hard time with the deck I built with this, but it is a very powerful attacker when it comes into play. Just to get it clear, even in Japan, the Pokebody and the second attack, they're supposed to be swapped around, but they just weren't for some reason. They got printed as this order, I don't know why. So, its Pokebody, which is supposed to be Mold Breaker, prevents its attack damage from being affected by resistance, Pokepowers, Pokebodies, or any other effects on the opponent. So even if they are agilitied, this just doesn't care. You can still hit through anyway. This is really good because Head Smash is 80 for 1 fighting. Unfortunately, if you do KO with this attack, you do 40 to yourself, which, you know, 130 HP, it's solid, but if you're doing 40 to yourself, that's kind of bad, right? But still, 80 for 1, really, really good. Mold Breaker, which is supposed to be Iron Skull, but whatever. 1 fighting, 1 colorless to do half that at 40 damage. But any damage that Rampardos takes until the end of your next turn is cut by 20. It's important to make the distinction here, because if you go Mold Breaker into a Head Smash KO the next turn, you are only doing 20 to yourself, as well as having 20 reduction on the opponent's turn. It's solid. It's just a really good attacker overall. Slacking, it's a slacking. They're never that good, to be honest. 4 colors for 150 is really good though, if you could get 4 energy on this thing. But it takes 50 more damage next turn, and it can never attack in consecutive turns. Lazy Punch should basically just be truant, but yeah, it can never attack 2 turns in a row, even if you bench it, so meh. Weavile G is good for this set, and I think no set afterwards. I didn't see any 09 format decks play this, but still pretty solid. No energy cost on this to search your deck for 2 basic SPs and bench them, which is good for team attack, because team attack for dark and double colorless does 10 plus 10 for every SP you have in play. Once again, 2 energy if you put a gain on this thing. It does include itself, so it's guaranteed to do 20 damage at the very least. But if you're leading this, you search your deck for the 2 SPs, you're just going to get a bunch of cool stuff out of that. So, good times. Altara is not particularly good, but if you can somehow manage to get the opponent to sleep, like say Dark Ride them next turn, after using Midnight Eyes, you can get an auto KO with Parry Song. Whoop-de-doo, not very strong. Bennett is supposed to be really good. This is one card we haven't really tested, but I could see why it'd be very strong. Temper Tantrum lets you discard as many cards as you like from your hand and put damage counters on Bennett equal to the amount of cards that you discarded, which is awkward looking power, but synergizes with its 2 attacks very well here. For 1 Psychic, you discard an energy from the Bennett and then switch all damage counters on the Bennett with those on the defending Pokemon. So yeah, nice little heal and switch damage stuff there as well. It can natively move up to 8 damage counters. You could technically put Unknown E on this thing to give it 10 extra HP and then move 9 damage counters instead, which is enough to get a KO on a lot of the SP Pokemon, so that's kind of cool. And then Loneliness for a Psychic and Colorless does 30 damage, but if you show the hand to your hand to the opponent and you don't have a Pokemon in that hand, you do 60 instead. So this is where Temper Tantrum actually comes in, where you discard excess Pokemon out of your hand so you don't have any Pokemon left. You show the opponent your hand, you do 120 to a Mewtwo, and your SP deck has a built-in counter to it, which is kind of neat. We'll briefly go over Bastiodon just because we went over Rampardos here. If it has a Pokemon tool attached to it, you heal in between every turn, which is kind of fun for a metal tanking thing. Iron Tackle's self-damage will get reduced by special metal energy, so if you can get enough of them down, then it'd be very cool, but it's also a fossil that takes like 4 energy, so it's never really happening. Blissey is kind of cool. If you discard a card out of your hand once per turn, you can heal 20 from one of your Pokemon. You can only do it once every turn. It is a hard once per turn on this thing, but that's still good. This was used as a one-off with the Delcatty to go ahead and just heal the damage that it does to itself. Return is also a solid enough attack if you're going for like some sort of turbo-y deck, where yeah, 20 for 1 and draw until you have 6 in hand. It's kind of alright. Looking over the rest of the stuff in this row, there's nothing really that's worth noting. Most of these cards are just a lot weaker than previous versions of stuff we had. There's a Gyarados over here that does like 100, it's Gyarados G, 110 natural HP too is insane. But yeah, it's not really strong enough to be honest, because it does less damage for every damage counter that's on it. So, whoop-de-doo, even with energy gain, these attacks are too expensive. Kricketune is fun, but overshadowed by Gyarados from Stormfront, and that's a deck we are going to see this round, so that's fine. 2 colorless energy, 20 damage for every Kricketot and Kricketune in your discard pile. Caps out at 120 if you get them all in. There is a way of evolving again in this set. With double colorless, this would be pretty cool. But by the time Double Colorless comes in, we have better versions of this to use, so it's just not worth it, unfortunately. Looking at the rest of the stuff here, I don't think there's anything until we get to the Torterra, which is a pretty fun card. The Green Blast lets you do 40 plus 10 for every grass energy on all of your Pokemon, and it's a grass double colorless for its cost, so that's pretty cool. If you use this with Sceptile, you'd be able to do very large amounts of damage with not a lot of energy in play, so that's fun. Toxicroak. It's not the promo Tox, but it is a really good Mewtwo counter if you can get Dialga G out. Anticipation prevents all effects of attacks excluding damage done to the Toxicroak. This is inherently good for beating Machamp because it's Psychic type, so you have the weakness matchup as well. But yeah, Unknown G is usually needed to provide this kind of effect for the SP Pokemon, but as you've seen, the SP energy costs are pretty expensive for not a ton of damage output. So having this naturally on something with weakness, yeah, they kind of made this specifically to say, okay, Machamp is going to be a problem for this archetype, let's make a counter. Because it also just kills it if you can double Machamp's weakness. Deep Poison for a Psychic Colorless only does 20, but if the opponent is poisoned, this does 60 instead. This will pair all the way down as a common, actually, with the Skuntank G, where if you have a Stadium card in play, specifically you, not just if there is one in play, each active is poisoned, but it doesn't affect SP Pokemon. So if you can put Lake Boundary in play, then you poison the opponent's Machamp, the Toxicroak doesn't get poisoned, and then Toxicroak does 60 times 2 because Lake Boundary doubles weakness instead of additive, so it does 120, and then Poison takes out the Machamp instead. And that's in between turns too, so Cynthia doesn't get to draw 8. Really, really strong. So yeah, natural inbuilt counter to the Machamp deck, which is very good actually. The deck I'm playing this week is going to deal with that for sure. Bronzong G is kind of interesting as well. Once during your turn before you attack, you can move an energy from one of your SP Pokemon to any other Pokemon you have in play, then put 2 damage counters on the Bronzong. That's an expensive cost to pay, but Poketurn is going to solve that. We'll get to that later on. Psychic Pulse, if you ever do get to use this, is 40 for Metal Double Colorless, and 10 to each of the opponent's bench that already has damage counters on them. We are getting to that point of showing why that matters, because the next card we're looking at is Crobat, which actually was an uncommon in this set too, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, Crobat revolutionizes a lot of the way the game is played just by itself, even if you don't play much of the other SP stuff. Flashbite lets you just put a damage counter on one of the opponent's Pokemon when you bench the Crobat. That's it. Toxic Fang is also kind of cool too if you are kind of pushed to play it. For Psychic Colorless, it double poisons the opponent's active, and notably this guy's weak to Lightning instead of Psychic, so you can put it up against Psychic stuff too. 0 Retreat, 80 HP basic, so really, really solid stats there too. There's a Houndoom G as well, which you may see played as an anti-Dialga tech in this round. The main both attacks are kind of neat here. It's a fire type that's weak to fighting, so it doesn't get killed by Palkia, which is kind of cool. Blackcry for Dark and Colorless does 20 and prevents the active from retreating or using powers next turn. Fine, you know, if they evolve, they still get out of it. You could still, you know, Poketurn and such if it's an SP. Dark Slash is kind of where it's at though. For a Dark Double Colorless, you do 40, and if you discard a Dark on the Houndoom G, you do 60 instead. So 60 times 2 on Dialga G level X, if it doesn't have a special medal on it, is enough for a one-shot. That's kind of where it is. If your deck loses hard to that and you can play Dark stuff, then you should probably try and play that. Most of the other things in here are relatively fringe, except the, for some reason, common Honchkrow. Again, this was an insane card, I don't know why it's a common in here. 80 HP, whatever. Lightning weak instead of fighting weak is pretty good. It's fighting resistant actually, so that's kind of nice. Honchkrow's command for no energy. Search your deck for 2 in any combination of Stadium cards and trainers with Team Galactic's invention in their name. In this set, that is specifically the Energy Gain, Power Spray, and Poketurn that we will go over in a little bit. So that's kind of cool, it gets you set up a bit. Next set, I think it can get SP Radar, which is significantly stronger for the set for the deck. It lets you actually search your Pokemon, so that'll help. And then Target Attack for a Dark Colorless, or 1 Dark and an Energy Gain. choose one of the opponent's Pokemon to snipe 20 on, but if that Pokemon already has damage counters on it, do 40 instead. So this works with the Crobat, of course, and lets you ping snipe to do 50 instead, which is pretty solid. And then, yeah, we have about, I think, 3 or 4 other fringe things to look at here. Lucario was kind of cool. Like, Aura Sphere, like, it's solid numbers, right? It's a 90 HP stage 1, no retreat cost is pretty good. 1 medal to do 30, snipe 10 is nice, and then 1 medal, 1 colorless to do 20 plus 10 for each of your bench Pokemon. So max out your bench, that does 70. It's cool. You can use special medals with this as well. I feel like it's just not quite enough though. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Mightyena over here is potentially fun, but I can't really play it this week because Gyarados is going to get played. If Mightyena is affected by a special condition, you ignore all the energy that's in its attack costs, so you actually use this with Skuntank despite it not being an SP Pokemon. And then for effectively 0 energy, you do 50, and if you have less energy on you than the defending Pokemon, you do 80 instead. So yeah, 80 for 0, plus the poison is 90, so it's respectable. But the opponent has to have energy on them to actually do that, so, you know, big rip on that one. The other one that synergizes with poison is Muck, where if it's affected by any special condition between turns, you heal 20 from it at any point that you want. So you could take the poison damage and then heal it straight off, which is pretty cool. Strange Poison for Psychic Colorless does 30, and if heads, you poison the opponent. If tails, you poison yourself. You're probably never using this attack unless you just don't have the energy for Strange Sludge though, because that's the one you want to do. 2 Psychic and the Colorless to do only 50, but if Muck itself is poisoned, you know, poison the poison type, because why not, you do 70 instead, and also Confusion. So yeah, you actually play this with the Skuntank. Poison yourself, do 70 plus Confusion, and the opponent is poisoned too, and you're healing between turns as well, so it's surprisingly solid. The Grimer also for no energy just gets another Grimer onto the bench, so you can get yourself set up pretty solidly with this little archetype over here. That's mostly it, with one exception down here. This Shuppet is actually its own deck, believe it or not. Fade Out is kind of an insane attack, to be honest. We've seen this on Sabrina's Ghastly before, but I think it was for 2 Psychic at that point, and it was a 30 HP basic, so that was like prohibitive at the time. But for 1 Psychic Energy, you do 30, and return Shuppet and all cards attached to it into the hand. If you don't have a bench, you can't use this, so you can't lose by doing this thing. But yeah, that's ridiculous. Plus power attaches in this format, so you can do 70 odds with this. When Expert Belt comes out, you can add 20 to that. And Shuppet Donk was a real deck that actually happened. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of wild. Otherwise, anything cool? I mean, if you do want to play the Mightyena, the Poochyena for 0 energy puts another Poochie on the bench, which is kind of neat. There's a Perogly where if you energy gain this, you could technically do its chip off attack for no energy and cut the opponent's hand down to 5. That's fine, I suppose. There's the Zangoose over here that, for 1 energy, switches the opponent's active and does 20 to the new thing you bring in. That's really solid for the 1 energy, because you get to choose what comes in, so that's cool. Chop Up is also kind of nice if you can build up to it, but that's expensive to do, so I don't know if that's going to happen, but hey, bring in another Pokemon off the bench, do 20, pretty solid. Alright, and now we get to the trainers, which are insane in this set. Broken Time Space is quite literally broken. Each player may evolve the Pokemon they just played or evolved during that turn. You can't level up in the same turn as this. Leveling up is still a slow action. But you can go from basic to stage 1 to stage 2 in the same turn on your first turn if you have this in your opening hand. So this is really good for recovery in decks like Gyarados. Beedrill will use this really well and all. And yeah, it's just ridiculous. There's no better way to put it. Cyrus's Conspiracy is the Castaway of Gen 4. Search your deck for a supporter card, a basic energy card, and a trainer with Team Galactic's invention in its name. So once again, these ones down here, all of them are exceptionally powerful, and you get to just get Cyrus. It doesn't say excluding Cyrus on it, so you just get Cyrus's Conspiracy, plus your energy for the turn, plus your tool that is exceptionally powerful. Galactic HQ is a stadium you would expect to see a lot more play in the Team Galactic decks at the moment, or the SP decks of this round. It might see play next round, but this round it's not as good because we need late boundary in order to score the KO with Toxicroak, so I'm not playing it for that reason. But if you put this down, any evolution that comes into play has they take 2 damage counters when they evolve. So softens things up, it's pretty good. You know, respectable enough stadium card. Denies a lot of the high-end stuff, it forces the opponent to have more BTSs. Yeah, it's okay. Level Max is an interesting card. If you flip heads on this thing, search your deck for a level X that levels up from one of your Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon. It counts as leveling up, so you do get the whole status condition healing and everything. It's on a coin flip, which is annoying. But if you're playing a deck that has 2 or even 3 different level X's, then which is possible, this can be really solid. AMU is a very good example of that. We did ban the Mesprit, but that's just one example. The Dialga Palkia Yuxi could be another one that gets played. I have used that in Palkia a lot, so yeah, potentially good stuff there. On the coin flipping side, if you are crazy enough, we don't have particularly strong heals at the moment, so Life Herb will heal 6 and all special conditions from one of your Pokemon if you flip heads. Super Scoop Up might just be better, but Super Scoop also doesn't let you keep energy in play, so there is that. Locus Investigation is a really good card. You look at the opponent's hand, and then you choose one player to shuffle draw 5. If you just need to draw more cards, this is just look at the opponent's hand and then get a reasonable shuffle draw, which is acceptable. It's like Professor Oak's research, except you get to see what the opponent has as well, so you can plan around it. But if you see that the opponent's got a ridiculous hand, including some of the stuff we're going to talk about here at the very end, yeah, you get to force them to shuffle draw back in, and then you could just still use a Claydol or something to refresh your hand. Very solid card. Good with Gengar as well, and the Rotom that I talked about earlier, because if you see that the opponent's got like 3+ trainer cards in their hand, then you can stop, you don't have to make them shuffle draw, you can just use your Poltergeist and be really good. Memory Berry comes back in here, so we can use our pre-evolutions attacks if we want to now. This is improved from what it used to be, because now it doesn't drop off at the end of the turn. So yeah, it just stays, and this is the way that Memory Berry type things will work for the rest of time. Memory Capsule is the most recent one that does this effect as well. Miasma Valley is an interesting card. Whenever a player puts a non-grass or psychic Pokemon from their hand to their bench, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. Unfortunately, all of the best coming into play powers are on psychic Pokemon. So this isn't a way for like Ampharos to be able to stop most of the best powers in play. You would technically stop Dialga from doing its thing. Whoop-de-doo. These are reprint ones, but we do have Pokemon Rescue. We aren't going to see this card come in very often because honestly, Time-Space Distortion is just better in my opinion. But the reason this is relevant is because in history, Time-Space Distortion was a roughly 1 in every 2 or 3 box secret rare, and was incredibly expensive as a result. Pokemon Rescue just gets 1 Pokemon from your discard pile, puts it into hand. Instead of flipping 3 coins and getting 1 per, but this is so important historically, because this was an uncommon that people actually had access to. So it's worth noting just because of that. You could argue that this would be playable if you were not wanting to overclog your hand, but even in Gyarados, a deck where you generally want to only get 1 card back most of the time, you're still better off just taking it because you've got Regis that can discard, you've got Felicity that can discard, you don't need to worry about taking SS Magikarps. You've got other Pokemon you can take as well. And then just before we get to the inventions, Rainbow Energy is returning to the game here. If we do need to have this, I don't know if there's a deck that plays Rainbow at the moment, but if there is, yeah, if there's a deck that wants it, and multi-energy is bots after all, yeah, it could come into play. Now let's talk about what makes SP insane, apart from just Cyrus, apart from just some of their overall power level of attacks as well. Energy gain, I've mentioned a lot of times, and I've roughly mentioned what it does. It's a Pokemon tool that if it's on an SP Pokemon, if it's not on an SP Pokemon, it gets discarded. But if it is on a Pokemon, it makes that Pokemon pay 1 less to attack. So it's functionally cheating out energy, because it's like almost energy acceleration, because it's removing a colorless from your cost. So it's effectively accelerating a colorless energy onto your Pokemon. Really, really strong effect. Poketurn returns one of your Pokemon SP and all cards attached to it into the hand. So this is Super Scoop Up, but without the flip. Only on SPs though. This is really good for the Crobat especially, but also the Bronzong as it shows here, because the Bronzong puts damage counters on itself, but when you put it back into hand you just heal it, which is really strong. But the Crobat of course has the coming into play power, so you can ping a damage counter, Poketurn, drop the Crobat, ping another damage counter, etc, etc. And then there's the most frustrating of the 3 in Power Spray. This is one of the only cards in the entire history of the Pokemon TCG actually, which interacts on the opponent's turn only. You can only play this card on the opponent's turn. When they play a Poké Power, you can play this and prevent the effects of that power. But you can only do this if you have at least 3 Pokemon SP in play. So Weavile, as it shows here, like Weavile Honchkrow, you don't play the Perugly, but Weavile and Honchkrow is a really good one for this set. If you start Weavile and 0 energy call for family and get your 2 SPs out, that's 3 that you have on board and you can immediately Power Spray on turn 1, which is very, very silly. But yeah, this card is one of the few that will make the opponent have to say response to the thing here. And yeah, it's usually a Yu-Gi-Oh thing, but if you have 3 SPs in play, you can drop this at any time and make the opponent very sad. Whew, there's a lot to go over in this set. Thankfully, yeah, there's probably not a lot of this that we're actually going to end up seeing. We'll see. The SP Pokemon are insane. They are not necessarily the fastest decks we've ever seen, but they are fast enough with the disruption in play as well that it's difficult to combat them. But not impossible, because stuff like Broken Time Space does make evolution a lot easier as well. So unlike, say, Gen 5, Gen 6 formats where most of the time the basic Pokemon were dominating, here we do still have some evolutions that will be really good. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Thank you very much for listening. If you have made it this far, I do very much appreciate you. And yeah, we'll be playing tomorrow from time of recording, but we'll just have to see what decks come up. How is Matt going to annoy us with Light Palkia Lock or something this time? I don't know. Or is he going to completely surprise me and play some really silly thing like Blastoise Delcatty? I doubt it, but we'll just have to see. Till next time though, take care.